So I've been on a few report projects recently, and I've just noticed that recently we've been doing really large, very difficult to manage InDesign documents, and there are some really good strategies that you can adopt to make things easier for everyone in the team. But one of the really big problems with that is that people kind of need to be on the same page when it comes to the skill set required, and it means that you have to delve a little bit deeper into what is InDesign and its various other tools. And so hopefully in this hour I can cover some of the broader approaches to that, and if we get close to the 1 hour mark, we might have to move some of the other tips and tricks to another week. What I'm doing right now is recording this, and I'll try and keep everything into small tidbits per topic. And what we'll do is we can break this particular presentation down into smaller videos and then just distribute them. So it means you don't have to go to that 1 hour video just to check up on how to save a book or whatever. Nicole's just been working on a report just recently that's about 200 pages, more than 200 pages long. And I see a lot of people just working on a single document in InDesign, and as everyone is aware in InDesign, you can't open and edit and work on the same document that another person is editing. So one of the easiest strategies that we can actually take in splitting up and managing a document across a larger team is to actually save the document as separate files. And InDesign allows us to actually merge all of those files together as chapters in a book. So the first thing I'll be talking about today is how to manage books. So in InDesign, if you go File, New, you can create new books rather than documents. And books are going to look a little bit weird from an InDesign perspective compared to a regular document in that, and I'll just go somewhere, where shall I save this one? We'll go in here. They're effectively just a panel where you load in other InDesign documents that make up chapters in your book. So if in this little menu button in the top right, this is basically where most of the stuff we're going to learn about books today exists. We can add document, or there's a little button down here, and from this I'm not going to use a proper project. Let's just go back to shortcuts. I'll probably copy this one into... I've set up 3 example chapters already. So if you've got an existing InDesign document, what you might want to do is go into that and save various copies of it, and just go through and delete the pages that don't make up your chapters. So we'll go chapter 0, which is usually your title page and your table of contents. And then you probably want to split things up and name them based on what's their content. So as we start adding documents, you'll see the books, it can see how many pages are in each one. It tells us that there's 1 to 3, 4 to 8, 9 to 12. And the best thing to do when you're editing and working on that book is everyone in the team opening the book up. If you open this book, if you open the chapter from the book, it will tell the other users that you're using that. So if I save this book now, and Emily Lung, who's in the audience, do you mind trying to open that book and open one of the chapters up. Well, I'll open up chapter 1. So you can open one of the others. So InDesign it'll tell us which one we've opened with this little icon, and hopefully once Emily opens chapter 0 or 2, you'll see there'll be a little lock symbol appearing here that just keeps everything manageable, so you can see who's accessing what. So books make things a little bit trickier when you're actually exporting. Let's assume that everything's done. What we would want to do in any form of document in terms of going to export that is we want to check that there is actually any errors happening in the document or not. So that's usually done through this little symbol down here telling us there's 30 errors. If I click on that and select Preflight panel, it's telling me there's a bunch of errors happening in that document. So there's overset text, there's style overrides, and we can click into those and it'll tell us where they are. So there's the heading that's got a style override, and there's set text in this text frame. We can actually check that stuff within books. So if you select your chapters in books and then run Preflight book, it'll ask you for a Preflight profile. Please let me know just if someone sort of puts their hand up or whatever in the chat to. Oh, here we go. There's questions as well. I'll try and address questions in a bit. If people want me to show them how to deal with Preflight settings, just let me know and I'll cover that one. But you can select your Preflight setting, tell it which layers you want to include. You can even get it to generate a report, but I usually find that it gets really complicated having to look through the report. You hit Preflight, and it will check through each of your documents and tell you where there's errors. So if you've got documents that are good, they'll come up as green, and you can then go through and check each one from a broader perspective. So chapter 0's got errors. I can open that one up. Emily, have you opened up chapter 2 yet or not? So Matt's asking, is there a way to split an existing file into chapters without duplicating? No, there isn't. You basically have to remove the pages that you don't want and then save and then open up the next and so on and so forth. Usually what you want to do is actually identify that you're going to be working on a large file prior to working on it and start working with chapters from day one rather than having to split something up. But yeah, it can take a bit of time to open up large files. There are some tips and tricks for that as well. But yeah, no, there's no solution there, sorry. I also like to use books because they let me manage things like DoublePage Spreads. So what you might find in your documents is that you might not be working on this particular template. You might be working with another architect's template, for example, which makes the chapter title for each section a double page spread, or you've got various pages within spreads within the document that need to be double page. And what ends up happening is it's really hard to actually see that the effect of adding pages to chapters has on the double page spreads later on, because even though we might want this page here to be double page, so it's going from 4 to 8. I mean, sorry, this page here is 4 and this page here is 5. If someone added an extra page to chapter 0, it would be really difficult to really keep track of that, especially in large documents. So what you can do within the book is you can set book page numbering options, and in here you can make sure that the numbers carry on from chapter to chapter. So chapter 1 ends at 3 and chapter 2 starts at 4. But you can also make sure that each chapter starts on either an odd or even page. So in this case, we want to make sure that, let's assume that this is a double page spread, that we want that to start on an even page. And in this case, what's also useful is we can get InDesign to automatically add blank pages to the end of chapters to make sure that the next chapter is starting on that point. So I usually like to do that. What that means though is it doesn't use a master page. It'll just automatically add an empty page on the end, and you then have to identify that that doesn't have the master and add that to that page. So if I do that and I jump into chapter 0 and I only add one page to that, so get my page panel out and add 1, you can see just by adding 1 it's ended up adding 2 to make sure that we're maintaining that even page scenario. And so what that ends up meaning is if I'm working on a large document by myself, I use chapters just to make sure that that double page spread is manageable. Yeah, so you can see here if I just as long as I just keep adding pages, it just makes sure that they're double. And then if we change that book setting now, book numbering options, and we make that odd, you can see there it's added that extra page on the end. So you need to come up with those rules based on the document you're working on more than anything. There are a few things though that we do need to manage, and that is paragraph styles and masters. Now, assuming that you have actually opened up the template that Nathan has produced, technically you shouldn't need to change any of your paragraph styles or masters because they've all been kindly designed quite well, sitting there in each of those templated documents. But because I've been seeing us working with a lot of joint venture partners, or we inherit documents from other companies as they move on to ours, it's probably a good idea to learn how to actually synchronize. So if I make any paragraph style changes in one chapter, so I'll just add some text here. By the way, you guys will get to see the new version of placeholder text in the meantime. So here we have some placeholder text, and I'll just apply a paragraph style to that. My environment's all messed up, so we'll just give that the basic text body, and we'll change text body to be a different color. If I can find color, so we'll just make that red. Saving that, we would in theory want all the text body edits to be colored to appear on other documents, and let's just make, so I'll just get rid of placeholder here, that'll go black. I'll get into what this is in a moment. Actually, let's do it here. So what you can do in the book, you can see this little symbol here in the top left, which indicates the style source. You can effectively decide on which chapter is the master source file. Oh, look at that! Emily has finally opened that InDesign document. You can see it's there; it's locked. So that helps us manage. And if I go to open it, it tells us that someone's already got it open. Cool, thanks Emily. And if you quit out of the document, dead air. That should go away in a moment. because if we do want to synchronize the paragraph style across those chapters, we will need all of these icons to either be dotted or locked. And to be honest, to avoid any complication, usually what I would hope is that you actually close all your chapters, saving them, for that to work. So I'm just going to work, there we go, Emily's out of chapter 2. We set our style source for chapter 0, and then we can run either synchronize book or synchronize options. I much prefer synchronize options because what it does is it allows you to actually see what you're synchronizing prior to running, and you can run synchronize from this dialog. And in this case, usually what I do is just turn everything on, but we're really focusing here on paragraph styles. With everything synchronized, the InDesign just automatically goes through. It warns you that maybe that paragraph styles might create non-overset or overset text, and it just basically processes each chapter to update those styles. And so now if I open up chapter 1, we can see there that that's now inherited that red font that we've changed in the master file. Cool. And then the last thing, sometimes you'll notice that the page numbers, second to last thing, page numbers don't update sometimes when people are working on their files. That can happen when people aren't opening the file within the book, the chapter within the book. Rather, they just open that InDesign file raw. So what you can then do, as long as everything's not locked still, you can then also run the update numbering and just say update all numbers, and InDesign will go through and just check all of that and make sure everything's up to date so that your page numbers are good. What that also does is if you've got automated table of contents in the document, it updates that stuff as well. I don't want to get too much into the table of contents because that can be quite finicky. That might be a better for another day, especially I might need to talk to Nathan about that a little bit more before we do that one. So does everyone feel... does anyone have any questions about books before I move on to what could be considered a slightly more advanced collaborative environment? Another thing I've noticed with a lot of workflows in Teams is that an InDesign user will be given a Word document, and in that Word document, there will be all the what is called copy or text for your publication is written up in Word, and someone then has to go migrate that information from Word into InDesign. And usually what then happens is any edits that are made to that copy are made in Word, and the InDesign user has to basically go through and redo most of the work. So it's a very difficult process of doing that because InDesign doesn't have any of the paragraph or character styles. Sorry, not InDesign, Word, and it gets a bit of a nightmare. And I was planning on actually showing some techniques of writing Word documents today and migrating them into InDesign. And you can see here I've even set up some paragraph styles to try and solve that. So dot points, normal, header 1, header 2, they've all got Word at the end. But it's actually a really buggy and not very well-defined process that I think, and I also think Nathan might agree, that we would hope that people just wouldn't use Word at all to write copy for InDesign, which then leads to the question, well, what do you use? And so the solution that Adobe have produced is a program called InCopy, which comes with InDesign packaged. So any of you that are using InDesign on your computer, if you press the Windows button and just type InCopy, you should have InCopy installed on your machine already. And InCopy is literally referring to that term copy, as in if anyone watches or has watched Mad Men, you'll constantly hear them referring to copywriters. So InCopy is designed for copywriters. It allows a copywriter to go and write content for a publication, such as this InDesign publication, without stepping on the toes of the designer. And I'll talk about using InCopy both from scratch and then also from an existing InDesign document. So InCopy is like InDesign Lite, and it's got a lot of restrictions. Think of it almost like a Revit viewer, in that you can open up and view InDesign files, but you basically can't touch them. InDesign takes a little step forward, and it says, well, you can at least edit the text. So I've set up this Cox InCopy template, which when you open it up, you can see there's 3 different views for your InCopy document. There's this layout view, and it's fairly unattractive A4 page environment. There's the story view, which is no frills text editor, and then the galley view, which I'll get into in a bit. But it's similar to the story view, but it has a little bit more information about it. The really cool thing about InCopy is, even though it's a text editor, and we can see that we can put all this placeholder text in, you can load into it. I'm flipping between programs. Let's bring up styles, paragraph styles. We can load into it from an InDesign file all the paragraph styles that exist in that InDesign file, and we can work on this. So go header 1, header 2, this is placeholder text. We can apply paragraph styles and see the visual result of that paragraph style regarding that InDesign file that we've sourced them from. Text, and let's chuck some bullets in here. But it doesn't necessarily have any relationship to that InDesign document. And the reason I feel like this might be appropriate is that for people who are working with InDesign users who don't necessarily understand InDesign, this is a fairly light version of it, that they don't need to worry about the graphic design element of it. They can just basically fill in their content. So if I go to the story view, you can see all the text that's been added to that layout has been added to that story view, and on the left it's identifying all the various paragraph styles that are used per line or per paragraph, rather than seeing it visually. And then it also has a galley view, which then shows you that text with wrapping once it gets to a text edge, and then associated with lines. With this layout, it will automatically add, let's just run some enters into this. It will automatically add pages to your document, just as if you were using Word. So it works very similar to that. But the overall effect of this is that we can actually link this into InDesign and use the content really quickly without having to spend too much effort. So just to prove that, I've got this raw InCopy text. Actually, no, let's just use this one just for proof. And I'll call this proof. So we can save this content. And I'll save it as proof. This InCopy file ends up being a content file that we can load into InDesign as a link. So if I in InDesign hit place and find that proof ICML file, there's that text, and it's also taking on all the various different paragraph style changes that I've made for this document. Now, this works just like any other link, except for one major difference, and that is that this link can be edited in InDesign, and InDesign will save its information back into the link. So you can see, if you go to Windows Editorial Assignments, it'll pull up the various different ICML files that you've loaded in, and I've loaded in another one in this one already, but here's proof. But at the same time, if I show my links panel, you can also see there's that proof ICML. I'll jump back into InDesign, I'll add extra to that, saving it and updating our link. Proof extra gets added, and if I close proof ICML, what that actually means is here there's a little symbol in the assignments which is showing that that particular text assignment is available. So if we think about assignments as like books on a shelf or in a library, if someone wants to read that book, what they have to do is check that book out of the library. If we want to edit this proof, this assignment, we can right click it and check it out. And what that will mean is I can edit this as I need to. Love my naming conventions. And then if I check that assignment back in, what it does is it makes it available for that InCopy user or other InDesign editor to work on. So if I go back into raw InCopy, oh no, it was proof. You can see there proof extra another title and extra title, and there's those changes made there. So these connections. The cool thing about this is if you've got assignments open in your InCopy, it'll tell you as well if it's being in use. And what you'll find is once you start using assignments, if you do, it will require you to. It'll ask you to fill out a user, so you can put your name in and give yourself a color, and as people are working on it, they can kind of see who's accessing what assignment and make judgments on managing that. It makes, if you think about it, people writing magazines and people writing newspapers are using these tools to manage large teams on large documents and sort of bringing all that stuff together. But there comes a time when InCopy can actually do a little bit more than what I'm showing you. This is InCopy opening an ICML file. What that means is we're effectively just creating a single piece of information that will get loaded in, and we might need multiple ICML files to make up a total document. InCopy can also open an InDesign file. So if I open up this same chapter, so chapter 1, and note, even though I've got it open in InDesign, InCopy didn't complain about it being opened. I can actually view this layout as is. And if I were to save this now, because I've added that ICML, and we refresh this, there we can see that assignment has in that document. So now, rather than just seeing one assignment and editing both, InCopy is showing us both assignments that have been put in that InDesign document, and it's showing that the proof version is available. So if I select that and check that out. By the way, Emily, if you don't mind, and opening up chapter 1, just to also help show a few things. in InCopy. We can make edits to this. We can check in that assignment, and if we update our links in InDesign, I've got a little shortcut that speeds that up. There's the text being altered. So this allows. This means that you can have a director and various other people in your file editing the text, and when things are actually starting to update, you can update them without having to redo all the paragraph style assignments and getting rid of overrides and whatnot. Another just useful thing within the story mode and also in the galley mode is if you start adding text and that text is going over the boundary of your text frames, InCopy will tell you that with this copy fit line. So it's at that point, us tiers, that we've hit that copy fit line. Sorry, let's look at this other one. Such conversations, that's where we hit that border. So even though it is a fairly simple text editor from this perspective, it does have an understanding of where your text sits within that greater document. So that's how you work with InCopy from scratch, and understand that a lot of people here probably aren't going to do that they're probably going to be using, they've got an existing InDesign document, and then they might be using that and producing InCopy files for someone to use. If you just give someone an InDesign document to open in InCopy without doing any prior preparation, it won't work. What you need to do is you need to convert all your text into assignments before that happens. And so if I just open up, let's open up chapter 2 and throw in some so here's the previous lorem ipsum in chapter 2. I'll just make sure that's part of the document. What you can do to turn everything, or at least, well, I'll go with everything first. You can turn every text frame in the document into assignments. You can do that just by going Edit, InCopy, Export All Stories. And it will then ask you to find a location somewhere on your computer or on the server to identify. So we'll go here, folder, assignments. We'll go chapter 2. But if I do that, what it's going to do is it's going to create an assignment for the section title. It's going to create an assignment for the captions under each image. It's going to be a little bit messy. So what you can do instead, rather, is select the stories that you want to turn into assignments and export that selection. And it'll ask you must save the document. Okay. So saving this chapter 2 file, just before I do, just show you, you can see now in the assignments, there's chapter 2, 116U and U1. We can go through and rename these to make these easier for people to manage. But if we open chapter 2 now in InCopy, those text areas that we have identified as being shareable and editable are now available within that environment. Does that make sense to everybody? I understand this is a rather radical approach to using InDesign. A lot of people haven't heard of InCopy before. Does anyone have any questions about it? No, except for John Ferrandinos. But that's why I'm making this video, because I'll show them, or you can show them. Yeah, I would do it. I would only do it if I knew one person was going to be writing content whilst another person was just doing the design work. So if you're getting a team member that's just going through and checking text and making changes, you get them to do it in InCopy. And the other really cool thing about InCopy is that you can leave notes just like you would in InDesign. Not sure if many people know about notes, but yeah, we got to check that out. Let's add a note. And notes will always, they'll show up in the stories text, and you can see who's written them as well. So my color's been associated with purple, but they won't affect the layout at all. And so rather than what I've seen is people putting notes in their Word documents and then we have to go clear them out, the notes in here, they don't affect the overall appearance of the document. It also has track changes, which if you turn on track changes here and make any changes to the document, it doesn't look like there's any track changes. Track changes only shows up within story or galley mode. So if I now, I didn't turn it on. There we go. So if any changes are made, we delete things or add things to the document, it's visible there, but it won't be visible within the layout mode, and the same would apply in InDesign. The track changes actually are visible there if you want to use track changes there, and so are the notes, but they won't show up as visual effects. Lauren's asked, will they need to stay assignments after converting them? No, they don't need to permanently be assignments. You can select something that has been made an assignment. Let's go to this one. And if I remember correctly, if after selecting that, if you click unlink content, what that will do is embed that text back into your InDesign document, and it won't be linked anymore. Yep. That's probably the better method of doing it, because then it doesn't mean that they have to open up like a InCopy template. Rather, you can just say, go open this file in InCopy, and you've identified which areas that have been set up to be edited. My only concern though is that there are people that are going and starting these copies from scratch, and it would be good to understand that there is software there that would make everyone's jobs a lot easier at the end of the day. Because I was struggling even just to get Word to import a simple document into InDesign in a reliable fashion. And as well, you do actually lose, like if you're linking stuff in, especially with Word, you can actually link Word documents into InDesign and have them update if someone updates the Word, but the likelihood of that breaking your InDesign document is really high. And as well, it means that you can't edit that text in InDesign without you breaking the link with that Word file. The cool thing about InCopy assignments in InDesign is the only link type that you can edit in InDesign that doesn't break the link with the file. So it saves whatever edits that you make in InDesign back to that file. Yes, or otherwise they can't touch it. So that's, I guess, another cool thing that you can do. You can say, hey, select the ones that are assignments, and then they can touch that stuff, they can edit it, they can see how it looks and how it affects the overall design. But it's like, as you can see, I can only select text. I can't change any of the images. I can only leave notes and I can move around and zoom. So it's actually it actually means that maybe this is the way that you want people who could potentially break your document, who don't know what they're doing. This is a far better program for them to go view it as well prior to exporting to PDF. So on that note, I've been sort of talking to some teams about Dropbox, and I've been on some teams that are using Dropbox. Dropbox, unfortunately, doesn't work that well with InDesign and InCopy. And the reason that is when someone has InDesign or InCopy or the assignment files open, the Adobe creates these lock files, which is what the software is doing to identify what's available and what's not. So it's a really rudimentary method for locking the file out. The problem is, if I were to go into a Dropbox job, or if I just save, let's create a new document. So there's my InDesign file. You can see up here untitled 1 C bracket BPD1 IDLK. So that's InDesign creating that lock file so that anyone else on the server trying to open that file can't open it. But the thing is, because it's like effectively a streamed file, similar to, I guess, the way Excel and Word opens their files, Dropbox can't actually sync that file. So you can see Dropbox struggling to sync it. I'm trying to point at it, but every time I do it, it wants to pause. So what that means is it's not getting uploaded to the Dropbox server, and therefore it's not getting downloaded onto the other users' computers to know that you have that InDesign file open. Now that applies to assignments, chapters and books, basically everything that InDesign or InCopy would create to lock out a file, which means a lot of this checking in and checking out process when it comes to Dropbox and InDesign, it doesn't work, because you can't tell if someone's got stuff open or not. So just be mindful, if you are working in a large team on Dropbox with InDesign, that you have to be really communicative about who's got what file open, or otherwise what you'll start seeing is like what Dropbox calls like file clashes. Like I know I was working on a document with Nicole a few weeks ago, and for pretty much every chapter there was like a copy, like it looked as if I'd gone and made a copy of it, which can get really annoying, especially if people are actually making major and important changes on a document, and they're clashing with other people doing the same thing. So just be mindful of that, please. Oh, actually, before I do open it up to questions, I want to throw a question at you guys, and that is, I've been asked to work out a way to make a placeholder text that doesn't screw up spell check. So the lorem ipsum that appears in our base templates, it's all Latin, and so if you were to actually run a spell checker on it, practically 90% of the words are going to come up affecting your spell check, and you have to basically skip over each of them. So Emily and Emily, more than anyone, has gone and extracted a bunch of words from the Cox website, from the articles, and we've generated our own random placeholder text. So if we go insert fill with placeholder text, it's full of more architecture based words, and it's UK English, so this particular document's doing spell checking in US, but all the words that are in there are avoiding spell, like they won't get picked up by spell checks, and it should be more relevant to the document you're working on, but it's got some obvious elements to it that are, like at the beginning of every paragraph it says placeholder text. Would you guys be interested in us trying to roll this out to everyone's computer? What it does mean is we have to talk to IT and give them a file, and IT have to put it on your C drive in the InDesign and InCopy folders for that to work. So it is a process, and I wanted to check with everyone before we just did it to everyone's computer. Is there any opinions on this? Yep. So the InDesign, the only way that you can change your placeholder text in InDesign is by going to Program Files, Adobe, your InDesign folder, and creating a file called Placeholder Text. And in Placeholder Text, you can write your placeholder text. The only problem with that, though, is you need admin rights to do that.